CEO hated beggars. Until homeless boy sang one song that made her mute son speak for the first time. What happened next will shatter you. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more miraculous stories. The sleek black BMW cut through Manhattan's morning traffic like a blade through silk. Madison Harper, 32 and ruthlessly successful, pressed the phone closer to her ear as she delivered the crushing news. 200 employees. Gone by Friday, she said coldly, her manicured fingers drumming against the steering wheel. I don't care about their Christmas bonuses, Marcus. The board wants results, not sob stories. Madison Harper was Wall Street's youngest and most feared CEO, a woman who built her empire on calculated decisions and frozen emotions. Her reputation preceded her into every boardroom, the ice queen who could destroy careers with a single glance. The traffic light turned red, forcing her to stop. Through her tinted windows, she noticed a group of homeless children huddled near the subway entrance, their small hands extended toward passing strangers, their hollow eyes and tattered. Clothes made her stomach turn with disgust. Pathetic, she muttered, rolling up her windows completely and turning up the heat. The moment the light changed, she accelerated, leaving them behind in a cloud of exhaust. At her Upper East Side mansion stood like a fortress of marble and glass, each room perfectly decorated, yet somehow empty. Inside, 7-year-old Sophia sat, motionless on the Persian rug, surrounded by expensive toys she never touched. Her blonde hair fell like a curtain around her face as she stared at nothing. Sophia, sweetheart, how was school? Madison asked, attempting warmth in her voice. But her daughter remained silent, as she had for 2 long years. Not since the accident. Not since Daddy died. Madison's jaw tightened as she dialed another number. Dr. Peterson? This is Madison Harper. The 10th therapist isn't working either. I need someone new by tomorrow. Money is no object. The house echoed with silence as Madison poured herself a glass of wine, staring out at the city lights. She had everything: penthouses, private jets, bank accounts that never ran dry. Yet she felt hollow inside, like a beautiful shell with nothing at its core. Later that night, alone in her marble bathroom, Madison finally let her mask slip. Tears she'd held back all day streamed down her face as she stared at her reflection. She was successful, wealthy, powerful, and completely, utterly alone. Outside, snow began to fall on the city that never sleeps, and somewhere in those cold streets, a miracle was waiting to change everything. The boardroom at Harper Industries felt like an Arctic wasteland as Madison delivered her final verdict. 20 executives sat frozen around the mahogany table, their faces pale with shock. Effective immediately, 200 positions will be eliminated, she announced, her voice cutting through the silence like ice. Human resources will handle the details. This meeting is adjourned. As the executives filed out in stunned silence, Madison gathered her papers with mechanical precision. Another day, another round of casualties in her corporate war. She felt nothing, no guilt, no remorse, just the cold satisfaction of a job. Well done. Walking down Fifth Avenue toward her car, Madison's heels clicked against the pavement with military precision. The winter air bit at her face, but she barely noticed. Her mind was already focused on the next quarterly report, the next acquisition, the next victory. Then she heard it, a voice so pure, so achingly beautiful that it stopped her mid-stride. The melody drifted through the canyon of skyscrapers, like something from another world, carrying notes of hope and love that seemed impossible in this concrete jungle. Following the sound, Madison turned the corner and saw her, a small girl, no more than 8 years old, sitting on a piece of cardboard near the subway entrance. Her clothes were worn and patched, but clean. Her dark hair was pulled back with a rubber band, and in her hands was a paper cup with a few coins rattling inside. Ruby Thompson sang with her eyes closed, her voice soaring above the city noise. The song spoke of unconditional love, of finding light in the darkest places, of hope that never dies. Passers-by stopped, mesmerized, dropping bills into her cup before moving on with tears in their eyes. Madison stood transfixed, feeling something stir deep inside her chest, an emotion she'd buried so long ago she'd forgotten it existed. Her hands trembled as the melody washed over her, breaking through walls she'd spent years building. When the song ended, the spell was broken. Madison stumbled backward, her heart racing with an unfamiliar rhythm. She turned and fled, her designer, heels clicking frantically against the pavement as she escaped from whatever magic the child had unleashed upon her frozen soul. But the voice followed her home, echoing in her dreams. Madison couldn't concentrate. The quarterly reports blurred before her eyes as Ruby's voice echoed in her memory like a haunting melody that refused to fade. She found herself staring out her office window, searching the streets below for a glimpse of the mysterious singing child. "Mrs. Harper?" Her assistant's voice cut through her reverie. "The Goldman meeting has been moved to 3 o'clock. Madison nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. Against every rational thought, she made a decision that would have shocked her own. Board of Directors. The next afternoon, Madison found herself walking down Fifth Avenue with Sophia's small hand tucked in hers. Her daughter moved like a ghost beside her, silent and withdrawn, her blue eyes reflecting nothing but emptiness. "We're just going for a walk, sweetheart," Madison whispered, though she knew exactly where they were headed. As they approached the familiar corner, Madison's heart began to race. Would the girl be there? Had it all been some stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many sleepless nights? But there she was, Ruby, sitting in the same spot with her cardboard cushion and paper cup, her voice rising like an angel's call above the urban chaos. Today she sang a gentle lullaby, something about mothers and daughters and love that never ends. Madison stopped at a safe distance, not wanting to disturb the performance. Other pedestrians gathered, their faces softening as the music worked. "It's magic." An elderly businessman wiped tears from his cheeks. A young mother pulled her toddler closer. Then something impossible happened. Sophia's grip on Madison's hand tightened. Her daughter's lips parted slightly, and in the faintest whisper, the first sound she'd made in 2 devastating years, came a single word: beautiful. Madison's world shattered and rebuilt itself in that instant. She dropped to her knees on the cold sidewalk, pulling Sophia into her arms as tears streamed down her face. The crowd around them gasped, sensing they'd witnessed something miraculous. "Did you hear that, baby? Did you speak?" Madison sobbed, her voice breaking with joy and disbelief. Ruby's song had stopped. The 8-year-old girl was looking directly at them now, her dark eyes filled with understanding far beyond her years. She smiled, a radiant expression that seemed to illuminate the entire street corner. "She has a beautiful voice," Sophia whispered again, her words clear as crystal bells. Madison couldn't stop crying. 2 years of silence, 2 years of guilt and desperation, shattered by a homeless child's song. She reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out $100 bill, placing it gently in Ruby's cup. "Thank you," Madison whispered to the girl. "Thank you for giving me back my daughter." Ruby's smile grew wider. "Music heals everything, lady. That's what my grandma says." As they walked away, Sophia's voice filled the space between them like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, and Madison knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Sleep eluded Madison that night. She paced her marble floors, Sophia's miraculous words echoing in her mind like a sacred prayer. By dawn, she'd made a decision that would have horrified her former self. She needed to know everything about the child who had performed the impossible. Find out everything she commanded her private investigator over the phone. Ruby Thompson, 8 years old. Lives somewhere in the city. I want her full background by tonight. The report arrived at 6 p.m., and what Madison read shattered her. Heart into 1,000,000 pieces. Ruby Thompson, age 8, orphaned 1 year ago when a devastating apartment fire claimed both parents. The investigation revealed faulty wiring in their Bronx tenement, a building owned by one of Madison's own subsidiary companies, though she'd never known it existed. But the tragedy didn't end there. Ruby now lived as the sole caretaker of her grandmother, Grace Thompson, 78 years old and suffering from severe diabetes. They resided in St. Mary's Shelter, a rundown facility for indigent seniors in the South Bronx. Every morning, Ruby walked 3 miles to Manhattan to sing on street corners. Every penny she earned went toward insulin for Grace and basic necessities. The child who had given Madison back her daughter was slowly dying under the weight of responsibilities no 8-year-old should bear. "Dear God," Madison whispered, the report trembling in her hands. Against all her instincts, Madison drove to the Bronx that evening. St. Mary's Shelter was a crumbling brick building that reeked of disinfectant and despair. The hallways were dimly lit, filled with forgotten souls waiting to die. She found Grace in a tiny room, barely large enough for a bed and a plastic chair. The elderly woman's dark skin was ashen, her breathing labored. But when she spoke about Ruby, her eyes lit up with fierce pride. "My Ruby's got the voice of an angel," Grace wheezed, her weathered hands clutching Madison's manicured ones. "She takes care of me like I'm the child, and she's the grown-up. That baby shouldn't have to worry about old Grace, but she won't hear." "Of leaving me?" Madison learned that Ruby sang their mother's lullabies to help Grace sleep through the pain. She read to her grandmother from library books, cooked simple meals on a hot plate, and administered insulin injections with the precision of a trained nurse. "She's all I got left in this world," Grace continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And I'm holding her back from having a real childhood. Sometimes I think she'd be better off if I just—" "Don't say that," Madison interrupted, surprising herself with the emotion in her voice. "Never say that." Driving home through the city lights, Madison felt the walls around her heart crumbling. Ruby wasn't just some talented street performer. She was a child sacrificing everything for love. A love so pure, it had reached across the divide between their worlds and touched Sophia's wounded soul. For the first time in her adult life, Madison Harper knew what she had to do. Madison burst through the doors of her mother's Fifth Avenue penthouse like a woman possessed. Eleanor Harper, 72 and dripping with diamonds, looked up from her afternoon tea with characteristic disdain. "Madison, darling, you look absolutely dreadful. Have you been crying?" "Mother, I need to tell you something extraordinary," Madison began, her voice trembling with excitement. Sophia spoke. After 2 years of silence, she actually spoke. Eleanor's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched skeptically. "How wonderful, dear. I assume Dr. Peterson finally earned his exorbitant fee?" "No, you don't understand. It wasn't a doctor. It was a child, a homeless girl who sings on the streets." Her voice somehow reached Sophia in a way nothing else could. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor set down her Wedgwood teacup with surgical precision. "I beg your pardon? You're telling me you've been exposing my granddaughter to street urchins?" Before Madison could respond, her brother Richard swept into the room, his expensive suit and cold eyes mirroring their mother's disapproval. At 35, Richard Harper was a corporate attorney who viewed human emotions as weaknesses to be exploited. "Madison's having another breakdown," he announced, loosening his tie. "I ran into Marcus at the club. He said you've been acting erratically at work." "I'm not having a breakdown," Madison protested. I'm trying to tell you about a miracle. This little girl, Ruby, she lives in a shelter with her dying grandmother. She takes care of Grace all by herself, singing for money to buy insulin. Enough. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. Madison Harper, you will not embarrass this family by consorting with beggars and charity cases. We have a reputation to maintain. Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be an investigation. Report. Ruby Thompson, age 8, ward of the state by proxy. Grandmother Grace Thompson, diabetic, no insurance, massive medical debt. This is obviously a scam, Madison. They're targeting you because you're wealthy and naive. It's not a scam. Madison's voice rose to a shout. Ruby doesn't even know who I am. She just sang, and Sophia had a momentary breakthrough. Eleanor interrupted coldly. It would have happened eventually with proper medical care. This street child had nothing to do with it. Richard's expression turned calculating. I'm concerned about your mental state, Madison. Making irrational decisions, emotional outbursts, believing in fairy tales about magic singing children. Perhaps we need to discuss your fitness to run the company. The threat hit Madison like a physical blow. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Richard smiled without warmth. Mother and I control 40% of Harper Industries. Add in our allied board members, and we could remove you tomorrow if we deem you mentally incompetent. Eleanor stood, her silk dress rustling like snake scales. Madison, darling, you're going through a difficult time. Grief makes people do foolish things. But I will not allow you to destroy everything your father built by throwing money at every sob story that tugs at your heartstrings. This isn't about money, Madison whispered, but her family had already stopped listening. As she drove home through the neon-lit streets, Madison realized she was truly alone in this battle. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was fighting for something that actually mattered. Defying her family's threats, Madison returned to the corner of Fifth Avenue the next morning with Sophia in tow. Her daughter had spoken 3 more words since yesterday: pretty, music, and friend. Each one a precious gift that made Madison's heart soar. Ruby was there as always. But today she wasn't singing. She sat hunched over a crumpled piece of paper, tears streaming down her young face. Ruby? Madison approached cautiously. What's wrong, sweetheart? The 8-year-old looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Grandma Grace got worse last night. The doctor says she needs new medicine, but it costs $300. I only made $47 this week. Without hesitation, Madison knelt down and pulled out her checkbook. What's the medicine called? Ruby stared in disbelief as Madison wrote out a check for $500. I can't take this, lady. It's too much money. My name is Madison, she said gently. And yes, you can take it. My daughter spoke for the first time in 2 years because of your beautiful voice. This is the least I can do. Sophia stepped forward shyly. Ruby, sing pretty. Ruby's face lit up like sunrise. You're the quiet girl from yesterday. You talked. Music makes words, Sophia whispered carefully, each word a monumental effort. Over the following weeks, Madison developed a routine that would have scandalized her social circle. Every afternoon, she'd pick up Sophia from her private school and drive to St. Mary's Shelter. She'd found ways to help discreetly, paying Grace's medical bills through anonymous donations, grading their tiny room with a better bed and a small refrigerator. Grace welcomed them with the warmth Madison's own mother had never shown. The elderly woman would hold court from her bed, telling stories about Ruby's parents and teaching both girls simple songs. Madison found herself laughing for the first time in years as Grace shared tales of her youth in Louisiana. You got light in your heart, child, Grace told Madison one afternoon. It was just hiding under all that fancy armor you've been wearing. Ruby, remained suspicious of Madison's motives initially. "Rich people don't help people like us unless they want something," she said with cynicism that broke Madison's heart. "What could I possibly want from you?" Madison asked. "I don't know," Ruby shrugged, "but there's always something." It was Sophia who finally bridged the gap between them. One afternoon, she brought her own toy piano to the shelter, a miniature. Grand piano that had cost more than most people made in a month. "For Ruby," Sophia announced clearly. "Make music together." Ruby's eyes filled with tears as she touched the ivory keys. "Nobody ever gave me something this beautiful before." As Ruby played a simple melody and Sophia hummed along, Madison felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. For 32 years, she'd believed that love was a transaction, something you earned through achievement or bought with money. But watching these two little girls create music together, she realized love was actually a gift you gave freely, expecting nothing in return. "Thank you," she whispered to Grace. "For what, sugar?" "For teaching me what family really means." Madison should have seen it coming. The Harper family didn't make idle threats, and their patience had finally run out. It started with the security detail. Two burly men in black suits appeared outside St. Mary's shelter on a Tuesday morning, blocking Madison's path with professional courtesy and immovable determination. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper," the larger one said, not sounding sorry at all. "Mr. Richard Harper has instructed us to ensure your safety. He's concerned about the neighborhood." "Get out of my way," Madison demanded, but they remained planted like oak trees. "We can't do that, ma'am. We have strict orders." Inside the shelter, Ruby waited by the window, watching for Madison's familiar BMW. When it didn't appear, her small face crumpled with disappointment. She'd been working on a new song all week, something special just for Sophia. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor Harper was making strategic phone calls to every member of Manhattan's elite social circle. "I'm terribly worried about Madison," she confided to Mrs. Rothschild over lunch at the plaza. "She's been acting so strangely since Michael's death, following around homeless children, giving away money to anyone with a sob story. The poor dear seems to have lost all sense of propriety." The rumors spread like wildfire through charity galas and country club dinners. Madison Harper was having a breakdown. Madison Harper was being taken advantage of by con artists. Madison Harper was no longer fit to run a billion-dollar corporation. But the cruelest blow came from an unexpected source. Director Williams of St. Mary's Shelter called an emergency meeting with his staff. "We've received some concerning information about one of our visitors," he announced gravely. "Madison Harper has been flagged as potentially dangerous to our residents." The allegations were vague, but damning. Mental instability, erratic behavior. Possible, using just enough legal terminology to sound credible without making specific accusations that could be easily disproven. "I'm afraid we'll have to ban Mrs. Harper from the premises," Director Williams concluded reluctantly. "We can't risk the safety of our residents." When Madison finally broke free from her security escort and arrived at the shelter, she found her path blocked by a very different kind of barrier. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper," the receptionist said, unable to meet her eyes. "You're no longer allowed to visit. Director's orders." "What? Why? What's happened?" "I can't discuss the details. You'll need to speak with our legal department." Madison's protests fell on deaf ears. As she stood helplessly in the lobby, she could hear Ruby's voice echoing from somewhere deep in the building, a sad, lonely melody that seemed to ask why everyone always left. The drive home was a blur of rage and tears. At her mansion, Sophia sat silent again on the Persian rug, her brief renaissance of speech already fading. Without Ruby's songs to inspire her, the words seemed to slip away like sand through fingers. "Sophia, sweetheart, can you say something? Anything." But her daughter just stared at her expensive toys with empty eyes. lost once again in the fortress of silence that grief had built around her heart. That night, Madison discovered the full scope of her family's betrayal when Richard called with barely concealed satisfaction. "I told you to drop this nonsense," he said coldly. "Now you've learned what happens when you embarrass the Harper name. Walk away, Madison, before things get worse." Madison hung up the phone and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. She'd underestimated her family's ruthlessness, and now Ruby and Grace were paying the price for her naivety. But as she watched the city lights flicker like distant stars, Madison Harper made a decision that would change everything. The war was just beginning. Dr. Sarah Chun had been Sophia's therapist for only 3 weeks, but she'd already accomplished what 10 previous doctors could not. She'd earned the little girl's trust. In her cozy office filled with art supplies and comfortable cushions, Sophia finally felt safe enough to unlock the vault of her memories. "Tell me about the last time you remember talking, Sophia," Dr. Chun said gently, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia's small hands clutched a purple crayon as she drew circles on paper, round and round, darker and darker. "Daddy's sick place," she finally whispered. "The white place where people sleep forever." Madison sat frozen in the corner chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. She'd attended every session, but nothing had prepared her for what was coming. "Can you tell me what happened at the hospital, sweetheart?" Dr. Chun asked. The crayon snapped in Sophia's hand. When she spoke, her voice was hollow, like she was recounting someone else's nightmare. Mommy was screaming at the nice lady in white. She said bad words, really loud. She said Daddy was stupid for driving in the rain. She said the doctors were idiots. She threw her coffee cup at the wall. Madison's blood turned to ice. She remembered that night differently, remembered her grief as justified anger, her demands for better care as reasonable expectations. But through Sophia's eyes, she saw the terrifying truth. The nice nurse was crying, Sophia continued, her voice getting smaller. Mommy's voice was scary, like a monster. And then they said Daddy was gone forever. And I thought maybe if I never talked like Mommy, maybe people wouldn't go away. The crayon pieces scattered across the floor as Sophia's body shook with silent sobs. Dr. Chun moved to comfort her, while Madison sat paralyzed by the magnitude of her failure. "She associated your voice with loss and pain," Dr. Chun explained later, after Sophia had fallen asleep on the office couch. In her child's mind, speaking became dangerous. It's why Ruby's singing broke through. It showed her that voices could carry love instead of anger. Madison stumbled out of the building and into her car, where she sat in the parking garage and screamed until her throat was raw. She'd spent 2 years blaming doctors, blaming God, blaming fate for her daughter's silence. She'd never once considered that she was the monster in Sophia's story. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ruby, somehow smuggled out through a sympathetic nurse. "Grace is getting sicker. Doctor says maybe weeks. She keeps asking where you went. I told her you didn't forget us." But Madison had forgotten him, hadn't she? In her war with her family, she'd lost sight of what mattered most. She'd become so focused on winning that she'd abandoned the very people who had shown her how to love. That night, she stood in Sophia's doorway, watching her daughter sleep fitfully, tiny fists clenched even in dreams. The beautiful child she'd given birth to was trapped in a prison of Madison's own making. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered into the darkness. "Mommy's going to fix this. I'm going to fix everything." Outside, snow began to fall again on the city, and Madison Harper finally understood that some battles couldn't be won with money or power or corporate strategy. Some battles could only be won with love. The Harper Foundation boardroom had hosted many hostile takeovers, but never one quite like this. Madison stood at the head of the mahogany table in her best power suit, facing 12 of Manhattan's most influential philanthropists, including her own mother and brother. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "I'm here to propose a fundamental change in how this foundation operates." Eleanor's face could have been carved from marble. "Madison, darling, you weren't invited to this meeting. Perhaps you should—" "I'm announcing the immediate liquidation of my personal trust fund," Madison interrupted, her words falling like bombs in the silent room. "All $47 million will be donated to establish a permanent endowment for St. Mary's Shelter and similar facilities across New York." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Richard shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. "You've completely lost your mind. That money belongs to this family, to our legacy." "Our legacy?" Madison laughed bitterly. "You mean our legacy of turning away from suffering? Of building walls between ourselves and anyone who needs help? I'm done with that legacy, Richard." "You're having a breakdown," Eleanor hissed. "Security, remove my daughter from this building immediately." But Madison was ready for them. She pulled out a thick legal document and slammed it on the table. "I've already filed the paperwork. It's done. Every penny goes to people who actually need it, not to fund more charity galas where you write tax-deductible checks and pat yourselves on the back." "We'll fight this," Richard snarled. "Mental incompetence, undue influence. We'll prove you. We're manipulated by those shelter people." "Try it," Madison shot back. "But first, let me tell you about Ruby Thompson. 8 years old, orphaned, caring for her dying grandmother, while you people spend more on wine at dinner than she sees in a month. She has more dignity in her little finger than this entire room combined." She turned to address the full board. "You want to know what real charity looks like? It's not writing checks from your trust funds. It's a child singing in the snow to buy insulin for the only family she has left. It's love without conditions, help without cameras to record your generosity." "That's enough." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. "You're embarrassing yourself and this family. Your father would be ashamed." "My father," Madison said quietly, "would be proud that I finally learned what he really tried to teach me. That money without compassion is worthless. That power without purpose is empty." She gathered her papers and headed for the door, but Eleanor's voice stopped her cold. "If you walk out that door, you're no longer my daughter. No more trust fund, no more inheritance, no more family name to protect you. You'll be just another nobody struggling to survive." Madison turned back one final time, and for the first time in years, she smiled with genuine peace. "Good," she said. "Maybe now I can finally learn what it means to be somebody who matters." As she walked through the marble lobby of the building her great-grandfather had built, Madison Harper felt lighter than she had in decades. Behind her, she could hear Richard shouting into his phone, probably calling lawyers. Ahead of her, somewhere in the Bronx, a little girl was singing to comfort her dying grandmother. The choice had never been clearer. Madison's hands shook as she signed the lease agreement for the modest 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. Building was clean but simple, a far cry from her Upper East Side mansion, but only 6 blocks from St. Mary's Shelter. "You sure about this location, lady?" the landlord asked, eyeing her designer clothes with confusion. "Most people with your background prefer Manhattan." "This is exactly where I need to be," Madison replied, accepting the keys that would unlock her new life. The apartment was sparse, second-hand furniture she'd bought online, basic appliances, and walls that needed fresh paint. But when Sophia walked through the door after school, she clapped her hands with delight. "Cozy," she announced, one of the new words that had been slowly returning to her vocabulary. The real test came 3 days later when Madison gathered the courage to return to St. Mary's Shelter. She'd called ahead, explaining to Director Williams that the allegations against her were fabricated by family members trying to control her charitable activities. Her new address in the community and a letter from Dr. Chun vouching for her mental stability had finally convinced him to lift the ban. Madison found Ruby in the recreation room, sitting alone while other children played. The 8-year-old looked smaller somehow, her usual spark dimmed by weeks of disappointment. "Ruby?" Madison's voice was barely a whisper. Ruby turned, and for a moment, hope flickered in her dark eyes before being replaced by wariness. "You came back." "I never wanted to leave," Madison said, kneeling to Ruby's eye level. "My family. They tried to stop me from seeing you and Grace. They had me banned from here." "Why would they do that?" Madison struggled to find words an 8-year-old could understand. "Because they're afraid of people like you. People who show love without asking for anything back. It scares them." Ruby studied Madison's face for a long moment. "Are you going to leave again?" "Never," Madison promised. "I sold everything I owned to make sure I could stay close to you and Grace. We're neighbors now." Grace's reaction was everything Madison could have hoped for. The elderly woman's face lit up like Christmas morning when Madison appeared in her doorway. "Sugar, we thought you done forgot about us old folks," Grace wheezed, reaching out with trembling hands. "I could never forget you," Madison said, settling into the plastic chair beside Grace's bed. "You taught me what family really means." Over the following weeks, Madison established new routines that felt more natural than anything she'd ever done in corporate boardrooms. Every morning, she'd help Grace with her medications while Ruby got ready for school. Afternoons were spent with all 3 generations together: Madison, Sophia, Ruby, and Grace, creating the family none of them had known they needed. Madison learned to cook simple meals on Grace's hot plate, though her attempts at cornbread brought howls of laughter from Ruby. "Miss Madison, that ain't bread, that's a brick." Ruby giggled, and even Sophia joined in the laughter. "Mama Madison funny," Sophia declared one evening, and the words hit Madison like a lightning bolt of pure joy. "Did she just call you Mama?" Ruby asked with wide eyes. Madison nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think she did." Grace smiled from her bed. "That's 'cause she knows real mothering when she sees it. Ain't about the blood that runs in your veins, sugar. It's about the love that flows from your heart." As winter turned to spring, their little apartment became a haven of music and laughter. Ruby taught Sophia simple songs on the toy piano, while Grace shared stories that made all of them dream of better tomorrows. For the first time in her life, Madison Harper was truly rich. Spring brought warmth to their little corner of the Bronx, and with it, a joy Madison had never imagined possible. Their small apartment had become a sanctuary where laughter echoed off the walls and music filled every corner. Grace had become the mother Madison never truly had. While Eleanor Harper dispensed criticism wrapped in designer clothing, Grace offered wisdom seasoned with unconditional love. "Sugar, you've been carrying that guilt like a 100-pound suitcase," Grace told Madison one afternoon as they watched Ruby and Sophia practice a duet. "Time to set it down and walk free." Madison learned to braid Ruby's hair each morning, fumbling with the unfamiliar task until Grace's patient coaching helped her master it. She discovered the simple pleasure of reading bedtime stories to both girls, their heads resting on her shoulders as they drifted off to sleep. "Tell the one about the princess who saved herself," Ruby would request, and Madison would spin tales of brave women who found strength they never knew they possessed. Sophia blossomed like a flower finally given sunlight. Her vocabulary expanded daily, and her laughter, genuine, spontaneous, musical, became the soundtrack of their lives. She called Madison Mama, now without hesitation, and Ruby had become my sister in her growing collection of words. Ruby taught both Madison And Sophia about finding magic in small things. A penny found on the sidewalk became treasure. A perfect cloud became a work of art. A song hummed while washing dishes became a concert. You don't need money to be rich, Ruby explained seriously as they shared a simple dinner of rice and beans. You just need people who love you no matter what. Madison volunteered at the shelter now, using her business skills to help other residents navigate social services and medical appointments. The corporate shark had been replaced by someone who saw people instead of profit margins. Their evening routine had become sacred. Grace would hold court from her bed, telling stories of her childhood in Louisiana, while Ruby played soft melodies on the toy piano. Sophia would curl up beside Madison, practicing new words by describing their day. We're a real family now, Sophia announced one night. Her blue eyes bright with contentment. Madison hugged her daughters, both of them close to her heart. Yes, baby, we're exactly the family we were meant to be. Outside their window, the city hummed with 8 million stories, but inside their little home, the only story that mattered was theirs. It happened on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Madison was helping Grace with her insulin injection when the elderly woman suddenly clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain. Grace! Madison cried as Grace collapsed back onto her pillow, gasping for breath. The ambulance ride to Bronx General Hospital felt like an eternity. Ruby sat frozen in the passenger seat, while Sophia held Madison's hand in the back, both girls watching Grace's still form with terror in their eyes. She's going to be okay, Madison whispered, though her own heart was breaking. Grace is strong. She's going to be okay. Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the cardiac unit 6 hours later with news that shattered their world. Mrs. Thompson has suffered a massive heart attack. We've stabilized her, but she needs immediate surgery to repair the damage. Without it, whatever it costs, Madison interrupted. Money is no object. The doctor's expression grew grave. The surgery itself is covered by Medicare, but there are complications. She'll need a specialized pacemaker that isn't standard coverage, plus extended rehabilitation. We're looking at approximately $80,000 in additional expenses. Madison's blood ran cold. She'd liquidated almost everything for the shelter endowment. Her checking account held maybe $12,000. But looking at Ruby's tear-stained face, she knew there was no choice. I'll handle it, she said firmly. That afternoon, Madison made the hardest phone calls of her life. Her remaining stock portfolio, gone. Her mother's pearls that she'd inherited from her grandmother, sold to a Fifth Avenue dealer. The Cartier watch Michael had given her for their anniversary, pawned for a fraction of its worth. Still, she was $15,000 short. Mrs. Harper, the hospital financial counselor, said gently, we understand this is difficult. Perhaps we could arrange a payment plan. No, Madison said sharply. Grace needs that surgery now. She found herself standing outside Eleanor's penthouse at midnight, swallowing her pride as she pressed the intercom button. Madison? Eleanor's voice crackled through the speaker. It's the middle of the night. Mother, I need $15,000. It's life or death. 20 minutes later, Eleanor appeared in her silk robe, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. So the little street urchin's grandmother is dying? How tragic. Please, Madison begged, the word tasting like ashes. I'll sign anything you want. I'll never speak to them again if that's what it takes. Just help me save her. Eleanor studied her daughter's desperate face. Very well. But understand this. After tonight, you are no longer my child. You've chosen them over your own blood. Madison signed the loan papers without reading them, her hands shaking as she wrote her name. I understand. The surgery lasted 14 hours. Madison, Ruby, and Sophia huddled together in the waiting room, sustained by vending machine coffee and the prayers of other shelter residents who'd come to show support. When Dr. Rodriguez finally emerged, exhausted but smiling, the entire waiting room erupted in cheers. The surgery was successful. Grace is going to need months of recovery, but she's going to live. Ruby launched herself into Madison's arms, sobbing with relief. "You saved her. You saved Grandma Grace." "We all saved her," Madison whispered. "That's what families do." 6 months after Grace's surgery, Madison stood in the offices of Hope and Healing Nonprofit Consultancy, her new company that helped charitable organizations maximize their impact. Gone were the days of corporate raids and hostile takeovers. Now she used her business expertise to strengthen food banks, homeless shelters, and community centers across New York. Mrs. Harper, the Brooklyn Family Services audit shows they could increase their efficiency by 30% with better resource allocation. Her assistant Marcus reported. The same Marcus she'd once ordered to fire 200 employees now helped her save organizations that served thousands. "Excellent. Schedule a meeting with their board for next week," Madison replied, reviewing quarterly reports that measured success in families housed, meals served, and lives changed rather than profit margins dotted home. Their little apartment had become a haven of healing and growth. Grace sat in her new wheelchair by the window, weaker but alive, her eyes bright as she watched Ruby practice violin with Sophia. The toy piano had been replaced by a real instrument donated by a grateful client of Madison's consultancy. "Play the happy song," Sophia requested. She attended regular therapy with Dr. Chun, but no longer needed it. The trauma that had stolen her voice had been healed by love and music. Ruby, now 9, balanced her time between school, violin lessons, and helping other children at the shelter. She'd become a bridge between the adult and child residents, translating complex emotions into simple songs that helped everyone cope. "Miss Madison," Ruby said one evening as they prepared dinner together, "remember when you used to be scary?" Madison laughed, stirring the pot of Grace's famous red beans and rice. "I was pretty awful, wasn't I?" "Not awful," Ruby corrected seriously. "Just sad. Really, really sad. But Grace says sadness is just love with nowhere to go. Now your love has lots of places." Through the window, Madison could see the lights of Manhattan glittering in the distance. Somewhere in those towers, her former life continued without her. Eleanor and Richard had made the society pages recently, some scandal, involving tax evasion and fraudulent charity deductions. Madison felt pity, not satisfaction, reading about their downfall. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. "Madison, this is Eleanor. I've been following your work in the newspaper. Perhaps we could have coffee sometime." Mother Madison showed the message to Grace, who smiled knowingly. "That woman's been watching you, sugar. Takes courage to admit when you're wrong, especially at her age." "Should I respond?" Madison asked. "That's up to you. But remember, everybody deserves a chance to grow. Even ice queens." That night, as Madison tucked both girls into their shared bedroom, Sophia made an announcement that stopped her heart. "Mama Madison, when I grow up, I want to help people like you do. And I want Ruby to be my sister forever and always." Ruby grinned from her bed. "We already are sisters, silly. Nobody can change that now." Madison kissed both foreheads, marveling at how 2 broken little girls had somehow put each other back together. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside their walls, all was peace. "Sweet dreams, my beautiful daughters," she whispered, and for the first time in her life, Madison Harper fell asleep, knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Eleanor Harper stood outside Madison's apartment building for 20 minutes before finding the courage to press the buzzer. At 72, the former socialite looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes unable to hide the weight of recent scandals and regrets. "Madison?" Her voice cracked through the intercom. It's your mother," May I come up? Madison's hands trembled as she buzzed Eleanor in. Grace squeezed her shoulder from her wheelchair. Remember, sugar? Hurt people, but healing people heal people. When the elevator doors opened, Madison barely recognized the woman who stepped out. Eleanor's face was pale, her famous composure replaced by something Madison had never seen before: vulnerability. Your apartment is charming, Eleanor said, her voice catching as she took in the simple furniture and children's artwork covering the refrigerator. Mother, what are you doing here? Eleanor's carefully constructed mask finally cracked. I've lost everything, Madison. The foundation, the penthouse, most of our assets. Richard's legal troubles. They've destroyed the Harper name. I heard about the investigation, Madison said carefully. I'm sorry. Are you? Eleanor looked genuinely surprised. After how we treated you. Ruby appeared in the doorway, violin case in hand, returning from her lesson. She studied Eleanor with the frank curiosity of childhood. You look like Mama Madison, Ruby observed. But sadder. Eleanor's breath caught. Mama Madison? That's what we call her, Ruby explained matter-of-factly. She's the best mama in the whole world. Are you her mama? I was, Eleanor whispered, tears finally spilling over. I don't know if I deserve to be anymore. Grace rolled her wheelchair closer. Deserving ain't got nothing to do with it, honey. Family is family, through good times and bad. Over dinner, simple but lovingly prepared, Eleanor watched the interactions between Madison, Ruby, Sophia, and Grace with growing amazement. This wasn't the cold, corporate daughter she'd raised. This woman laughed freely, hugged constantly, and lit up when the children spoke. They brought out the real you, Eleanor said quietly as the girls practiced their evening duet. The Madison I glimpsed when you were very small, before I taught you to build walls. It's not too late to tear down walls, Mother, Madison offered gently. When Sophia shyly asked Eleanor if she'd like to hear their concert, the elderly woman nodded through her tears. As Ruby and Sophia's voices blended in perfect harmony, singing about love that forgives and families that heal, Eleanor Harper finally understood what true wealth looked like. Can you forgive me? She whispered to Madison. We already have, Madison replied, and meant it completely. 1 year later, the golden lights of Carnegie Hall blazed against the New York skyline as Madison stood backstage, adjusting Ruby's performance dress with trembling fingers. The 10-year-old girl, who had once sung for coins on street corners, was now the featured soloist for the Hope and Healing Foundation's inaugural benefit concert. You nervous, Mama Madison? Ruby asked, her dark eyes sparkling with excitement. Terrified, Madison admitted with a laugh, but the good kind of terrified. Sophia appeared beside them in her matching dress, no longer the silent child who had retreated from the world. Ruby, you're going to be amazing. Grace sat in her wheelchair in the wings, wearing the elegant blue dress Eleanor had bought her especially for tonight. My girls are going to bring down the house, she declared with pride. As the curtain rose, Madison watched from the audience as Ruby walked confidently to center stage. The same voice that had once broken through Madison's frozen heart now filled the magnificent hall with pure, crystalline notes. Ruby began with the lullaby she'd been singing that first day, the song about love that heals and hope that never dies. But tonight, she wasn't alone. Sophia joined her on stage, their voices blending in harmonies they practiced for months. In the front row, Eleanor dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, finally understanding the magic her daughter had tried to explain. Around them, the audience of donors and dignitaries wept openly as the children sang an original composition about second chances and families born from love rather than blood. The concert raised $2 million for homeless shelters across the city. But for Madison, the real treasure was sitting in that audience. Grace beaming with pride, Eleanor holding her hand without shame, and hundreds of people whose hearts had been opened by the same miracle that had saved her own soul. After the final bow, the 4 generations of their chosen family gathered backstage. Ruby and Sophia chattered excitedly about their performance, while Grace offered her gentle wisdom. "You know what the best part was?" Grace asked, her weathered hands clasped in her lap. "What, Grandma Grace?" Sophia asked. "Watching love multiply, instead of divide. Started with one scared mama and one lonely little girl, and look at us now." As they walked out into the New York night, past the same corner where their story began, Madison marveled at the journey that had brought them together. She had lost a fortune, but gained something infinitely more valuable, a family bound not by blood or law, but by the unbreakable bonds of unconditional love. Ruby began humming softly as they strolled down Fifth Avenue, and soon all 4 voices joined in harmony, their song of redemption echoing through the city that had witnessed their miracle.